better that I turn it like this?
That sounds, yes, that looks much better. All right.
Okay.
I'm recording. We do have some people online, and I have a couple questions for you, but thanks for being here. We appreciate the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and hear how you stand on issues facing Virginia today. So I guess to start off, how about for the people that don't know you and haven't heard of you, tell us a bit about yourself and your history in Virginia politics.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be interviewed. I had no intentions of ever running for anything. I served in the banking finance industry. I worked for a number of S&P 500 companies in management. And when I came home with my four kids, we homeschooled. And it was at that point that education became the number one issue for me with my kids, protecting homeschooling in Virginia. And I remember it was the year 2008 that I first got involved with politics. I heard the name Barack Obama, and I knew I had to get involved and do something. And I didn't know about the GOP at that point, but I did know about wall builders, and I knew about David Barton through the homeschool community. And so he had these comparison flyers between McCain and Barack Obama. And I was actually printing these forms off from wall builders and organizing what turned out to be about 400 people in the greater Richmond area to pass these out at the polls on election day. And apparently that was quite the feat. It caught the attention of the Family Foundation, and we partnered together. They actually had materials after we ran out of the wall builders. It just got to be so expensive to print it all out. And they said, well, we just happen to have thousands of comparison flyers here at the Family Foundation, but we have no one to distribute that. So I said, well, we have 400 volunteers. So that was my first adventure into politics. I helped with the local school board race of a guy who worked for me back in the banking industry, helped him get elected and he promised me he was going to protect homeschooling in Virginia. So my three sons and my daughter, who were young at the time, they worked for Gatorade, and the school board candidate could afford the Gatorade, so it all worked out. And that was my first taste of politics, at the local level. And soon thereafter, got involved in my local GOP in Chesterfield County in 2008, and worked in the trenches for years. I mean, that's 2008. Y'all can do the math. It's been a long time. So I'm a worker bee, but I also have the executive experience from the private sector back whenever I was in the real world working, trying to make a living, support our kids. But, when we had kids, I came home, I homeschooled them. And, now my four kids, I'm happy to report, we're 4 for 4 on thriving young adults. My oldest daughter is married to a doctor. She's a PA. They live in North Carolina. She's a PA at Wake Forest Medical Center. I think they call it Baptist for short. My two middle sons own $1 million landscaping business in Chesterfield County. And then my youngest son is a financial planner. So I'm super proud of my kids. They're my why for why I do what I do. I want to have grandkids someday that have a thriving education system where we have school choice in Virginia, true school choice, voucher, so that the money follows the child. And we get our kids out of these indoctrination breeding grounds. And I know I'm just preaching to the choir here, but I'm sick and tired of the left controlling education in Virginia, and it should be the parents driving that education in Virginia. So that's very important. Um, and one of my top issues, actually, I left corporate America to come home and homeschool my kids. Did that for 8 years. Then I went to work for a number of statewide candidates. And as a result of that, I have incredible experience running campaigns. I started my own campaign consulting business back in the day before I became a state senator back in 2016. So as Virginia's next governor, you will have someone that understands this. It's great to have the business background, which I also have. My family, we have businesses, but I also have the political, uh, I guess you call it being politically savvy. There is an importance, and we see what happens when people come from the business world and they have no clue about the political world, how different that can be. We see with President Trump 2.0, he's not only got business experience at that point, but now he understands the swamp and how that works. And that's going to be important with Virginia's next governor. You have to understand how to navigate the political swamp in Richmond, which I've done for 8 years. I've stood my ground. I've spoken truth to power. We as Republican senators in the Republican caucus, they don't like to. There's certain issues during COVID that we weren't supposed to talk about. I talked about all of them. Elections being stolen. I said it. The 2020 presidential election was stolen because it was. And lo and behold, I was right. President Trump is right there with me. He was censured like I was. I was illegally censured because I stood with President Trump on January the 6th. I actually attended the rally. And for attending the rally, I was illegally censured by the Senate Democrats and 3 Republicans, interestingly enough, rhinos. And I've stood my ground. I don't back down. And I'm not going to be easily swayed or manipulated by lobbyists or PACs. I don't even take money from PACs or lobbyists, by the way. I began that in 2019. I understand how the swamp works, and there are strings attached when you take money from groups, and I realize that, and it's important for people to know that, because there's even Republicans who say they are conservative who do take money from PACs and lobbyists. They support corporate welfare, whereas I don't. I would abolish Go Virginia. It's a slush fund for corporate America. I think that we need to refocus look at Virginia's governor. We need a Doge in Virginia. I totally agree with one of the candidates on that. We do need. I've studied the budget. My background is finance. Those of you who get my Honey Badger report know that I follow the Senate, even though I'm not in the Senate, and I issue daily reports during General Assembly so that you know what's really going on, which bills passed, which ones failed. I outline in my Honey Badger report how our budget has doubled since 2010. Doubled. Can you imagine your household budget if it doubled in 10 years? I mean, it's great if you're getting raises and you're able to keep up with the rate of inflation, but most families, because of inflation, are having to cut their spending. And, I don't see our state government doing that. They just keep, when they say they're going to cut the budget, they're not really cutting the budget. They're cutting their proposed budget, but the spending is continuing to go up exponentially. So I'm business smart, but I'm also politically savvy too. And as Virginia's next governor, I know of the 3 candidates running, I believe with all my heart I'm the only one who can actually beat Abigail Spanberger.
With you spent 2 terms as a senator, correct?
That
If
is correct.
so, did the Democrats hold majority through your whole time in the Senate? And if they did, how did you navigate working with them? Because they'll still have the majority if you win in November. How will you work with the Democrats to try to bring forth some conservative bills, which is very difficult in Virginia?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. And, a lot of that I will do through executive order. And that's going to be, I'm different from all the other candidates running because I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And to answer your question specifically, I have served in the majority, I've served in the minority, I have served under Democrat governors and Republican governors. And interestingly enough, most of the legislation I passed was in my first 4 years that I was in office. Why is that? Because I held both Republicans and Democrats accountable, and they would purposely not pass my legislation just because they didn't like that I would, bring to light what they were doing in the darkness. And, you know, I hate to say it, but Republicans need to be held accountable too. And when it comes to spending, when it came to COVID, I was the only candidate pushing back against the COVID mandates. I introduced legislation to say, no, you should not be penalized if you choose not to wear a mask. You should not be penalized if you choose not to get the vaccine. I even had some Republicans voting against that legislation initially. I don't think that constitutional health care crisis, I don't think a healthcare crisis is an excuse to violate our constitutional rights, no matter what's going on in the world. You need to protect people's constitutional rights, and that trumps party. And I had to remind my Republican colleagues that they can choose to wear a mask, they can or not. They should be able to choose. The people should be able to choose to get the vaccine or not. It should never be a mandate. You should never, as a be forced to choose between your health, between continuing your education, putting food on the table for your family through employment, or even getting health care. I mean, I was denied services because I refused to wear a mask. I remember that I had wax in my ear, and I had to go physically to the doctor. And I walked in there without a mask, and he thought I'd walked in there with no clothes on. It was the same reaction. They ushered me around to the back and said, they remembered me. The doctor said, because I'm very active in the district that I served in the state senate. And they took me to the back and took care of the issue there, and I could hear again. But it's this whole overreaction to COVID, that I mean, 4 years later, I mean, I hate to say I told people so, but I was right. The election was stolen. It was a complete hoax. COVID, although there were people who died of it, it was created in a lab in Wuhan, but initially it was here in the United States by our own government. This is our own government killing us. I understand the globalists. I understand their desire for population control. I understand that they want less human beings, and they don't. But let me make sure that that that's not you. They don't want conservatives to be the remaining human beings on the earth. They want it to be people who share their ideology. They want to control everything. So, first, if you look at the Democratic Party, they're the party of kill, steal, and destroy. I'm 100% pro-life from conception. I don't think there's ever a opportunity or reason that we should be killing babies. Never. There's no exceptions to that. Never. Why would you make an excuse to kill a kid? You wouldn't. Now, in the adolescent years, that might be another story, but maybe not. Not really. I know somebody's going to take that out of context. I can say that as a mother of four, all my kids survived. So, but seriously, now look at if a child actually survives the womb and they make it, then what happens whenever they go to school? Now we have indoctrination where we have schools allowing children to read books, indoctrinating them into becoming the opposite sex, becoming someone who God did not create them to be. And they're not even allowed to tell the parents. I mean, Democrats do not want parental involvement. They want government to be God. It's just unbelievable what's going on in our public schools. 20 years ago, when I was raising my kids, we chose to homeschool because we thought our schools had gone a step too far. Now, 20 something years later, I'm telling people, do not send your kid to public school and expect them to come out and share your values. It's not going to happen. So
you've really covered someone had a question about, Youngkin primarily one on education and the parents' frustration of the schools being shut down, and McAuliffe's statement that parents don't have any say in any right to have say in their children's education. So you hit her question on the head. So I'm assuming by your answer that God forbid another pandemic hits, you would not shut down the schools.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will share this story with you very briefly. Senator Chap Peterson's a Democrat. He was a Democrat. He's no longer in office. After I finished going through my list of studies that have been done on masks, he walked over to me, not on the floor of the Senate, but in another committee, and said that was the best list of studies on why we should open our schools and why we shouldn't be wearing the mask. This is a Senate Democrat. So while it may not have necessarily been my amendment, it was a Democrat senator's amendment. I was able to influence people because I equipped myself, was knowledgeable on the issues. And sometimes, what does Ronald Reagan say? It doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as things get done. I have a lot of legislation that's passed the Virginia General Assembly that's out there to this day that is work that came from an idea that I introduced and moved forward. I don't care who gets the credit.
Wonderful. One of our members posed a question, asking if you would elaborate on your good work in forming the General Assembly's Transparency Caucus. They thought people might want, and I have not actually heard you speak on that, so now I'm interested.
Okay, sure. Well, as the people of God, we are a light. And so I carry that with me everywhere I go, shedding light on darkness. Now, there's plenty of darkness in the world, but there's especially plenty of darkness, I hate to say it, in the General Assembly. And so my first year in office, I partnered with a gentleman, a member of the House of Delegates, who I later would find out was one of the most liberal members of the House of Delegates at the time, Delegate Mark Levine. And we both believed that government should be more transparent. And that's about the only thing we agreed on. We disagreed on everything else, but we formed this friendship because we believed in shedding light on darkness. So we focused on that and we got it done. And now, as a result of our work, you can actually continue to this day. It's part of, I guess you could call my legacy from being in the Senate. You can actually go to virginiageneralassembly.gov and you can watch committee meetings in while they're meeting. You can even ask questions. You can oppose or support a bill while the committee is meeting. That's never been done before in Virginia's history.
Um,
And so that's one of the things I'm very proud of as part of the Transparency Caucus, giving people an opportunity to have a say and to watch their state government in action, making the laws, and not just on the floor of the Senate, which is what it was before, but in the subcommittees, in the committees. You can watch the entire General Assembly, which I do. Even this is my second term of not being in the state Senate and watching session, and still making my comments on supporting or opposing certain bills and conveying that information to the people to make so they can call and get involved and call their legislator and support or oppose a bill accordingly.
Thank you very much for that. It's really very important. Um, Al, you had a question?
Yeah, I just on mute there. Amanda, hi, how are you? Thanks for coming and meeting with us again. Appreciate that. I do have a question, and it's not one of the ones that's written down here, but it's just since it's something that just surfaced. I wanted to get your impression of something, how you would handle something that's happening today in Fairfax County. Just recently, you're probably aware of this, they're celebrating Women's History Month in Fairfax County. One of the schools there decided that they would put the ABCs on the wall, and the A stands for abortion. So I was wondering if you're fortunate enough to be our governor and something like that pops up again, what tool would you use to shut something like that down?
Well, day one, I would issue an executive order that made so that the public schools would understand that they would not receive any state funding if we had signs of indoctrination like this. This is indoctrination. This is political. They shouldn't be they should not be proposing death, killing babies in a public school classroom. They're promoting a political agenda. They should be supporting life instead of death. So we will have a very clear executive order day one that helps our public schools know that we're not going to tolerate trying to indoctrinate our kids into ideologies. Right now, they're trying to teach the religion of human secularism. Many of us are people of faith. I know that whenever I send my kids to public school, first of all, let me just begin by saying I don't want to continue the way we are going with our education system at all. It's completely broken. You're going to see competition with all schools because the parent is going to be given a voucher. Now, the average cost to educate a kid is between 9 and 15 grand a year, according to the public school. I think it should be much less than that. But the parent who is given that state funding can choose to send their kids to a private Christian school. They can choose to apply it toward a homeschool co-op. The parent will have a voucher and the parent will be put in the driver's seat. Our public schools that promote this crap are going to go away because parents who want to indoctrinate their kids, if they want to spend their voucher on that, then I don't think we're going to find a lot of parents funding a school that promotes that ideology. So it's a totally different way of thinking. It's going to be defunding this. We don't, just like we should never be funding Planned Parenthood in our Virginia budget, we should never be funding using state dollars indoctrination that the left has consistently done since they took control in 2020 and before.
So are
Thank
you,
you. Quick follow-up on it, if I could. Um, I was supposing that you agree with the concept from the federal government of doing away with the Department of Education at the federal level. And just recently, and I think it's Illinois or Indiana, one of the two, is trying to pass a bill locally that would allow the state education level to get into the what is being taught at the homeschools. In other words, they want to, approve the curriculum, everything else, basically force them to report and do that. You would not follow up doing that. Homeschool is homeschool, right?
That's exactly right. I homeschooled for 8 years under religious exemption. And guess what? My kids turned out great. Parents love their kids and they want to do what's best for their kids. Now, when I got involved in politics, we made the decision to send our kids to a private Christian school, and my paycheck went to pay toward the private Christian school. Parents should be able to have the opportunity to support a school that supports their ideology. And our country was based on Judeo-Christian values. I remember my grandfather, who has passed at the age of 96, said that when he was in public school, they read from the Bible, they wrote cursive from the Bible, and now you can't even find the Bible in our public school system. That's considered, quote unquote, the myth of church and state. That's a myth. We have actually taught, I mean, my grandfather was taught from the Bible in a public school in Georgia. We have believed this myth that there is a separation of church and state, and we could go down a rabbit hole on that. I could talk about Danbury letters and all that. But I believe with the rise of mental illness in our schools and with our kids and the confusion that they seem, the sexual dysphoria that we have seen promoted in our school systems, parents more than ever want an alternative to the one size fits all education that they're getting right now.
thank you. Does anybody else have a question? No? Linda? Then I'll go again. So listening to you speak, education is a high priority, an issue. What other issues do you see that are important for a governor, if you would get elected? What are your issues you want to address besides education?
Well, this is on the same line of that. We have seen DEI in every aspect of our lives, and it needs to go by the wayside in our employment, our education, all aspects of life. And it has gone to an extreme level to the point where there's no longer a meritocracy. It is actually racism being promoted. I called it state government, state funded racism is what it is. That's what DEI is. So we need to eliminate all racism in our schools, and that begins with DEI. We need to eliminate that from our workplace. There should not be the mandates on our employers to put forth education on government-funded racism. That's what it is. Let's call it for what it is. That's what DEI is. So that's another second issue. One of the things that I have not talked about, which is really my number one issue, is election integrity. Many of you all know that I stated the 2020 presidential election was stolen. It was. Now I can prove it. My team has issued something called the Virginia Report, which we released. Um, it's over the since the past year, where we actually show, we teach people about the algorithms that are being used in Virginia, how our state races are being monitored federally through these Albert sensors. There's the ability to change results online, that our computers are connected to the internet. I will happily debate anybody who wants to challenge me on that. I can even tell you the page number in the manufacturer's voting computer handbook on how you can hook your computer to the modem. Um, so we need to do what President Trump is doing with his recent executive order. We need an election day, not a season. We need to go to hand counts, paper ballots, get rid of the voting computers completely, no tabulators. There have been cases where it's shown where they're, even the tabulators are at least 7% off, like they were in Prince William County. We have to regain the confidence of Virginians that their vote is going to count. And if other countries can do that, then so can we. We can count it at the precinct level. And how about allowing all the counties to report at the same time? Have you ever noticed how Fairfax County always mysteriously reports their numbers after everyone else is reported? I don't agree with that. It needs to all be reported at the same time. It needs to be hand counted in the precincts with plenty of eyes on the process. It should be very transparent. Let's have cameras in the room so that the American public can see the counting of the ballots and that process. No more behind closed doors. No more just like what we saw in Pennsylvania and Georgia, where they put up the curtain so that nobody could see what they were doing. All the ballots they were pulling out of bins and cartons at the last minute, truckloads full. We need more transparency in our elections, not less. And I stand with President Trump on that. I believe that we are still, I mean, President Trump has actually already shown that this has actually been happening. And we even had, even as this past year, a lot of our federal elections were stolen as well, down ticket from President Trump. So we have a lot of work to do, but I will have a zero tolerance. I will do a full forensic audit of Virginia's State Board of Elections, a full forensic audit. We will get all of the illegals off of our voter rolls, not just a handful, but all of them. We will stay off of Eric. I'm glad that we're not on Eric anymore. We need to make sure that we never see that again. If we don't have voting computers, we don't have to worry about that. There's a lot of things that we can do to make the process better. And that will be one of my top priorities.
What influence does the governor have on the length of early voting? Virginia is one of the states, we don't have the longest early voting period, but it's up there. 45 days is crazy. I know it's more the legislative body that determines that, but what influence would you have on shortening that?
Well, I think we need an executive order so that we can regain control of our elections. We're not going to win back the House and the Senate if we keep doing what we've been doing. I did not agree with Governor Youngkin's latest decision that we just adopt what the Democrats are doing and go along to get along, sign up for the permanent absentee voting, where the state board just automatically sends you a live ballot. I mean, I just think that's very dangerous. They don't even do that in third world countries. Mail-in ballots, we need an excuse. We really need to minimize the mail-in ballots, and really we should have precincts overseas where we have our military and our veterans, so that that's safe and secure, and that we need to reduce the number of mail-in ballots that we have. And to go back to your question, these folks are continuing to cheat. There's going to continue to be maladministration, is what we're supposed to say, but it's cheating. So I'm going to call it for what it is. And until we have a Republican governor that actually will have the fortitude to say enough is enough, I'm going to use an executive order so that you can't cheat anymore. It's never going to change. We're never going to have a legislature that's going to approve going back to a photo ID, getting rid of the voter boxes, where there's no chain of custody. You just drop off, like we saw with 2000 Mules, where people were just dropping off these handfuls of ballots, and there's no person to receive them. I mean, for Governor Youngkin or anyone else to come back and say, we're going to do what the Democrats are going to do is ludicrous. And I was very honest. I said, I respect the governor, but I do not agree with this decision. It is legalizing and giving permission for people to cheat, and I will never fall in that camp ever.
Well, thank you. I don't want to monopolize. I want to put up. Anybody have questions that's generated?
Well, I agree with you on the, let's cut down the early voting. It should be just, make it a federal holiday or a state holiday if it's state elections or anything like that. But doing it as an executive order is a good first start. But I guess we got to. That's why it's important to get the legislature both in our favor there, because it's got to be codified in the Virginia Constitution, the extended days, because somebody's going to come along and just by executive order change the executive order. So that's something that's got to be standardized. I think Virginia has the second longest behind Pennsylvania as far as early elections. In the Texas, we did it for 10 days, and even that, people were complaining about being too long. So the 45 days here is just crazy. And we've talked to people here, we worked the elections, and they didn't understand that it was the Democrats who actually put that in play, because people were wondering, why do we have 45 days? Well, there's the consequences for not paying attention and taking care of local elections and being in charge there, which is what we got to do this time as well.
That's exactly right. And something that's important to understand. I served in the legislature. I understand how that works. I understood my limitations. We have three equal branches of government. They're very separate. As an executive, you can't introduce legislation. And when I hear the lieutenant governor or the governor saying, I'm going to introduce legislation, no, they cannot introduce legislation. They have to find a legislator to patron the bill to get it passed and sign into law. But you're in the executive branch. The only thing you could do is influence legislators or issue executive orders. And, different legislators feel differently about that. I'm sick and tired of when the Democrats get in power, it's balls to the wall, accelerator to the floor. They do whatever they want to do. They do not follow laws. They do not follow the Constitution. And then we as Republicans we don't fight when we're in control. When we have control, we just barely do anything. I think that's what the executive order is for, to take it. We don't want to abuse it, but we will need to take us back to the Constitution. We need to right the wrongs that have been done in the past. Shoot, the censure for me was illegally done. I had an illegal censure. They didn't even follow their own Senate rules, much less the Constitution of Virginia. Look at all the gun control bills that passed, which is another thing that I would reverse through executive order. Take us back to the Constitution. Shall not be infringed. Our Second Amendment rights are protected not only in the U.S. Constitution, but in the state constitution as well. And how many times have Democrats passed legislation that violate our Constitution, period? And that's got to stop.
Agree.
I know. I'm sorry, Al. Go ahead. Do you have something else? Okay. I know that you have your time's limited, Amanda, because you got to leave. I just have Amanda Abigail Spanberger. So, and her tactics, and the persona that she likes to represent. If you were to win in the primary and you come up against her, how will you counteract that and defeat her?
Number one, Abigail Spanberger is beatable. Abigail Spanberger votes 98% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. But also look at who her boss is. It's John Brennan. Now, who is John Brennan? Everybody knows he was the head of the CIA. That was her boss. A known commie. Okay. Where is Abigail Spanberger getting her money? I can't wait to talk about that on September 19th if I have the opportunity to debate her. She's getting her money from NGOs, from USAID. Look at the list of organizations that were founded with Soros money, which is really taxpayer money. Now we know where the Democrats are getting their money. And now President Trump has cut that off. So when she blows through that money, it's gone. She doesn't have any more. It's interesting if you look at the rallies now by the Democrats. You no longer see you see a handful of people instead of millions of people who were paid actors with all these national revolts and the BLM and the Antifa. I mean, it was all part of the Democratic Party. Now that's gone. President Trump has cut that off. He's cut off Abigail Spanberger's money, and I'm gonna, it's like the Wizard of Oz. I'm gonna show the who's behind the curtain, and Abigail's not um, who she proposes to be, and I'm going to link her to the nefarious actors. But we can also talk about, having served in the Virginia Senate, I have a knowledge of the bills that the Democrats passed. Like, we're going to talk about Virginia's vehicle emission requirements are, thanks to Senate Democrats and House Democrats, are connected to California. So people are not going to have the freedom to choose the vehicle they drive, thanks to Abigail Spanberger and the Democrats. We're going to talk about late term abortion and how they're killing babies at birth, live births. Abigail Spanberger supports death. We're going to connect, and I know the legislation that the Democrats consistently pass because I served in there for 8 years, and that's important. I mean, Abigail Spanberger's never served in state government. She's only served at the federal level. We actually get things done in the state government. We do. We have to balance our budget every year. She is totally inept. She has no knowledge of state government. She doesn't understand how things work. She only knows how the federal government, and we know how ineffective that is. We'll get her on the issues that Senate Democrats and House Democrats have passed for the past 10 years, the 8 years that I served. No swing voter is going to ever support their agenda. They're just not. That's why they had an open invasion at the border, because they knew Americans, these were America last, not America first policies. And no true American is going to support that agenda. That's why they opened our borders and had the invasion, because that's the only way they could get voters to vote for them.
Thank you.
For the record, there was many of us didn't care when they brought John Brennan back to the agency.
Fair enough.
So, because I know you said you have to get out of town, would you like to wrap up and get your last push in there? Because I'm going to share this around the county. It'll go on our website, the Conservative of Lake Frederick, and I'll direct everybody there so they'll be able to hear this. I also posted we recorded you when you spoke at the FCRC meeting last week, so that's on our website as well, so that people can hear you from different venues.
I appreciate you all doing that. The most important thing is, I'm not a candidate for governor until I get my signatures. We have a 10,000 signature state board of election requirement. It's a law, and you have to have 400 signatures in each district. And we're giving daily updates to folks as to where we are. And currently, we're short about 350 signatures in Loudoun County alone. So this is all for naught if we don't get our signatures by this coming Thursday. So whoever's listening to this, go to my website. If you like what you hear, go to chaseforgovernor.com. You need to print it off, front and back, double-sided, print off the petition, take it to your local Lowe's, your neighbors, stick it in your purse, and every friend you come along, ask them to sign it. But I have to turn these in before Thursday. So we're going to be at the Fauquier County GOP meeting tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening. This evening, I'll be in Fredericksburg at Gormelt's. And then on Wednesday, I will be at the Rally for Life in Richmond. And I'll be at the Bell Tower if people want to get their forms notarized. Don't forget to get it notarized. You guys have done a great job doing that. Bring me your notarized forms at the Bell Tower on Wednesday. And then we're going to verify all the signatures and turn them in on Thursday, and pray to God that we have 400 in each congressional district. So
I will definitely keep you in my prayers. Do you have contacts in the different counties that our people can contact and work with?
So people can reach out to me directly. My cell phone number is 804 370-8727. And yes, I do pick up. You can text me or call me at that number and we'll connect you